Hello, today I'm going to take you for a tour of my garden here in Central Florida. I've been on this property for about 6 months now. Started planting, uh, first couple plantings in January and then March, so this is just getting started, but it's going to give you a good idea of what things might look like in your yard when you first start out. Now, it's 2 days past the summer solstice, middle of the day. It's very hot. This property specifically is very dry and sandy, so things aren't as happy as they could be, but we are expecting some rain this afternoon, so fingers crossed they're going to be getting some good water. Without further ado, I'm going to show you around what's growing out here. So this area right here is just my temporary nursery. I'm doing some annuals in pots. Got basil and tomatoes with some thyme growing down there. I always have a fire bush around. Now with the grow bags, they're great for the root development and the aeration of the soil, but they do dry out very easily. So I find that they really need to be buried in the mulch, which these are not buried as much as they should be. But if you do bury them, it helps a lot with the water retention. And then if you look here, this is sun hemp, there's cowpeas, some different types of sorghum grass that are growing up here in this area that will eventually become the annual garden for this property. I'm going to take you over and tell you a little bit more about that and how you can get started on it in your yard. This area here is going to be the main production garden for this yard. It's where I'm going to grow my annuals, all my short season crops, but I didn't want to till, add in fertilizers. I wanted to do a regenerative practice that's actually going to build soil and improve this yard for whoever lives here after I leave. So the process I'm going through here, if you take a look, this is wood chips and leaves, several inches thick. I'd say when we started it was about a foot, but it's broken down a lot. It was placed about 6 months ago when I first got here. The soil underneath is much wetter, still very sandy. This stuff has not turned into humus yet. We are not at the place we want to be for annuals, but it is a far cry better from the powder that's in the rest of the yard. Now, this bed sat with mulch, nothing growing in it, for about 4 months, and then I started seeding in as many support species as I could into the mulch. There's lots of cowpeas, there's sorghum, sun hemp is all through here, sunflowers, and with this type of bed in these conditions where it's not being irrigated, we're going to run into situations where a lot of those seeds won't germinate. And then when they do germinate, they may not thrive in these mulched conditions. But when we over apply seeds, we do get the strongest of the generations that make it out here. And these are all short-term plants. Nothing out here right now is really meant for harvest. It's going to grow until it starts to flower, and then it's going to be cut, turned back into mulch to feed this bed. Now, if you take a look right here, last month I started planting cassava out here. So what I did was I spread this mulch back to the soil and just put these cassava cuttings in. And that is going to be my first main crop for this bed. But really what that's going to accomplish by putting the cassava in there, it's going to allow water to get in through the mulch and start accumulating in the soil, because these leaves do keep a lot of that from getting down into the soil surface. And as this cassava grows, it's going to provide canopy for this entire section. There's about 17 plants in here, so the whole thing is going to be quite shaded. And in the meantime, I've got Seminole pumpkins coming through that cover the soil. I do plan to harvest some of those. That's not going to be a sacrificial plant. And it is starting to flower now. I'm getting some good female flowers on there. Hopefully I see some pumpkins coming soon. But on the other side, I've started to establish the long-term maintenance for this bed. So this is a deep mulch bed. It's going to continue to have a deep mulch layer on it throughout the years, and I don't want to have to keep bringing in wood chips, leaves from outside of this property because it's expensive, it's time consuming. It also brings in potentially invasive plants. That is not something we want growing here. And what you're basically led to do is just hand pull those weeds when they come up. Luckily they do sprout slowly, and you can kind of keep on top of it as long as you're pulling every day. But in the long term, I'm going to need more mulch, and so that is what this is the beginning of. This is alternating lemongrass and vetiver grass, which are very fast growing bunching grasses that will be able to be cut 2 to 3 times a month depending on the species. There's other few species that I'm going to incorporate out here, see what grows the best. But when these are cut, they'll be applied to this garden bed, and that'll be the mulch for the years to come. The wood chips help get started, especially when you don't have the bunching grasses already growing on the property. But after those first couple seasons, you really want to find a way to produce your biomass on the property. And a great way to produce biomass is with a banana circle. And I'm going to show you how mine is growing in this next clip. So this is my banana pit. It was featured on my channel when we first put it in. Pablo helped me prepare this site and plant these bananas, which have grown quite a lot since they were put in about 3 months ago, and this whole system has changed several times. I'm going to get a little deeper and tell you about what's been growing in here. So right now, the big producer of biomass is this Napier grass. I have 2 clumps of this. This was cut probably 2 weeks ago. I cut it a lot. A lot of the biomass inside the banana pit has come from that grass. I have learned that it has the potential to become invasive when unmanaged. So looking for other alternatives, but in the meantime, it is a great producer as long as you can stay on top of it and keep it cut. Now, the other thing that had taken over this entire bed was this squash here. And this was actually a Sickle squash plant. The seeds came from Josh Jameson at Cody Cove. An excellent ground cover. 2 plants had this entire area covered. It did start to weather, and the production wasn't high enough for me to justify the space, so I decided to cut the plant back, put it all in the center. It is completely broken down at this point, but there are still some remnants hanging in. I think there's also a Seminole pumpkin in the back. I've got a canna lily here. This is another biomass plant that needs to be cut because it's getting ready to flower. But really they do require a lot of water, and they're not so happy in my yard with how much I don't irrigate. But this banana pit has been great for biomass. It's also a great composting area. I've been burying bokashi, putting food scraps out here. We don't have a lot of animal pressure, so I'm able to at least leave vegetative material just kind of laying around without anything bothering it. You can see the Everglades tomato in the middle is looking very rough. It's probably on the end. It was almost entirely shaded by the Sickle squash, and when I cut that back, it just got fried in the sun. But we do have sunshine mimosa here, which is starting to spread and take over. I've also been seeding sun hemp around the whole property. So it's starting to pop up. You can see some seedlings down here. Again, that Napier grass just going crazy. And I can show you an example of how the Sakil likes to run, because I've got 2 vines that have just made their way out here. And I have not gotten any fruit off either of these vines. I have heard it does take a while, but they may just not be happy enough with the amount of nutrients in this soil. So for me, it's just a ground cover, and for food I'm going to keep growing Seminole pumpkins. But all in all, the banana circle is looking really good, and I'm going to take you over to the next spot that's looking even better. So right in this area is the very first bed that I planted on this property. This is a Scarlet Beauty plum, very first tree that went in, and I did get 3 plums off of it this spring. Nothing to write home about, but they are delicious, and I'm excited for the future harvest. Now underneath this, primarily it's dune sunflower, which is a great ground cover, very easy to propagate, and then the rest of it is another Sakil plant, and this is one plant. It's probably spread close to 25 feet. And while I was talking to you, I did just see this, which one of the reasons maybe I don't get much harvest is because they're hard to find. But here is a Sakil right in here, and this is actually a little bit too big now to be ideal to harvest, but it did just break. So I'm gonna go in here. There you go. It's a very pretty squash, and I have eaten it. It's very similar to zucchini, but seems to hold up a little bit more substantially when you cook it. But the idea for this bed, it's really just a border for the annual garden. It's gonna be a border for this whole area. This was a future bed, or a later bed that was connected to it, and in the end the beds are going to circle the outside of this and just create a nice shaded area here in the middle, and then the production garden up there in full sun. But I do have some interesting species growing out here. This Spanish bayonet was just a random find off a project, and it is a mean plant, but I find it beautiful, and I can't wait to see it flower. Got a native skullcap back there just popping off, and actually I'm catching my arm here on this red finger lime. I've tried a few now, and I'm gonna have to recommend growing them in the shade. They seem to handle that a lot better unless they're on real heavy irrigation. But the beauty berry's doing great here, and then there's a black Suriname cherry in the back. A lot of density in this bed. There's also lots of stuff mixed into the understory here. Aloe is a great medicinal plant to keep in your yard. There's sage here, which we cut and use in the kitchen all the time. Calendula growing right behind it. And then I've got, again, sunshine mimosa in the understory, and Okinawa spinach poking up, pineapples. Density is key. And we've also got pigeon peas emerging through the dune sunflower, which will provide a nice canopy. This plum's going to appreciate a little bit of protection from the wind and the sun that's going to give it. But all in all, it's successional, and it's doing very well right now. This has not been irrigated today. We're just hoping for some rain tonight. Now this bed is very interesting because it started off just from cuttings. I was trying out cuttings of different species. There was mulberry, chaya, sugarcane, nothing really rooted. So I started in mixing seeds and then planting a couple things. But right here, kind of just standing out, is a tobacco plant. I'm growing a couple different varieties of tobacco this year. They're great. They help catch a lot of the gnats flying around the yard. Their leaves are like fly paper. They keep pests away. And tobacco is a valuable commodity. It can be dried and used, traded, lots of great resources. I've mixed in some native grasses. This is Elliott's Love Grass. It's going to be a biomass producer as well, but it is a very much slower growth rate. So I'm going to let it produce biomass as it naturally would. The older leaves will come down to the bottom, they'll die back, and then eventually detach, and I'll be able to just pull them out and spread them in small places. Now next to this is a great dryland species called Panadol. It is an herb, it's a culinary herb. It's very fragrant and it's very good at repelling pests. The odor from this is very strong and most insects don't appreciate it. It's also reportedly good at keeping away rats and cats. Haven't seen tests of that yet, but the fragrance is strong. If you could smell through this camera, it's all I can smell right now. But also in this bed, just from seeds and other little random experiments, there's some tomatoes growing here. I don't know which varieties these are anymore. That's what happens when you throw seeds around. But we got basil next to it. And this is just from selective thinning. This was a nice moringa I got from David at Practical Plants. I forget the variety, but it's an Indian variety specifically for pod production. So it's going to make a lot longer and softer pods, less fibrous than your standard moringas would. It's also got pretty large leaves, which is nice. Dual purpose. Got some Katuk back here. But really, all the annuals in this bed one day will be shaded out by this loquat. At least that is the intention. The loquat is struggling a little bit, but we're just building soil around it now. Loquat's a real hardy species. We've got a toilet paper plant here, which came from a cutting, and from what I've found, these are the cuttings that just won't quit. I have been using it as a chop and drop, but I'm sure to only use the soft green stems, because what I've found is those woody stems in there, if you put them on the dirt, they're gonna root, and you don't necessarily want these large plants growing everywhere. I've also got some sweet potato mixed in here. They're just starting to take off now. They're actually looking real good. Wilted from the middle of the day, but that's pretty typical for sweet potatoes if they're not on irrigation. I've also got some annual Mexican sunflower over here next to the dune sunflower, which again is just a great ground cover. Then you can see some of the cuttings that I'm trying. I think these are mulberries. Not much hope for them at this point, but the Yaupon holly here in the middle is doing great. I can't wait for that to grow up. And all in all, I'd say this bed has been pretty productive. Lots of tomatoes out of here, already harvested some tobacco, and I can't wait to see how it evolves. This right here is the latest bed that was put in, and it is quite the experiment. So it was done on basically a $0 budget. We double dug the ground to clear out some of these invasive grasses. I believe it's guinea grass that's growing all here along the back of the property, but we just dug up the clumps, turned the soil, and then in the center we buried a trench of bokashi. And it's not finished bokashi, so we didn't want to plant onto it, so we took these roselles and planted them on the berm on top of the bokashi. And then I actually used the invasive grass as a resource. As long as it doesn't have seed stalks on it, it can be cut and mulched just like the other grasses we talked about. And you can get an idea for what that's going to be, and it actually makes a very nice mulch. I will be cutting more of this to put some more in because I can still see some soil, but all in all it's doing real well. I also mixed in some dune sunflower cuttings. You can see them in here kind of throughout just to start covering the soil again. Also seeded in cow peas because you got to keep that soil covered, and it's ideal if you're doing it with living plants. So this is an experimental bed. I love roselle. Didn't really have anywhere else to plant it yet, and so this just became an easy prep for how to make a bed in a day. Now we're on to what has become the most productive area of the property. This is a lower corner, so when the water runs through, it does come through here most of the time. I hand watered this, hasn't been watered in 2 days. Supposed to rain yesterday, so we're fingers crossed that it's going to rain today. But a lot of the species here are picked because they're well adapted to this dry kind of sandy soil. We've got Chapman's goldenrod. This has become the goldenrod bed because it is mixed in throughout here. This is a sweet acacia, which is a great native. It's thorny, but the flowers just smell incredible, but none on there right now. This is a lemongrass. Needs to be cut, but we've been using this one in the kitchen, so I was just letting it grow until the other one's established. Ideally, I'd like the avocado to fill in this bed, but it really has not been thriving as of yet. It may still be establishing its roots. I'm going to let it hang in there and see what it does, but it may need to be swapped out with a species that can handle a little sandier of soils. Now this eggplant I posted yesterday on my story, and it is just popping off. And I've got a Florida green eyes. Let's see if I can find any of the flowers. They wilt during the days, but they smell like chocolate. It's incredible, and because they're fragrant, it does help repel some pests. So this eggplant is doing great and is real happy. I've also got a lot of nitrogen fixers in this bed. I don't think you can ever use too many nitrogen fixers, and it's going to take some management to keep them all under control, but the bed itself is loving it. I've got partridge pea right here, which is a native legume. It's not very happy. It does prefer some wetter conditions, but it is growing. What is happy is the sunshine mimosa. It does not mind rain or shine. It is always growing. And then again, another goldenrod here in the middle, just loving it here in the dry. But if you're wondering what's really thriving in this bed, it's the peanuts. So these are annual peanuts, a couple different varieties. There's Crawford, I think of Valencia. I mix so many seeds together that it's hard to keep track, but they're delicious peanuts. They'll be ready, I'd say, in another 2 weeks or so. And I'll just pull them right out of the ground, and then there'll be a lot more open space in this area. You can see there's also tobaccos in this bed, which will not be here for much longer. So when that stuff is all cleared, there's going to be a lot more room for things like this guava here to expand. I've got a mulberry. This is a native red mulberry that's going to get quite large in this bed. And then, of course, got to have a pigeon pea. This is actually a red pigeon pea from my friend Marcos. Definitely check out the Florida Barter Hub. Find out about that. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. There's some Egyptian walking onions. I mix in pineapples everywhere that I can. Some more natives out here. But really, this bed has just been great. It was all tilled initially to remove the grass. I mixed in compost, worm castings, a lot of humic acids, and then I deep mulched it and we started planting. I'd say most of the success is due to the species that were chosen. The peanuts are going to love it no matter what. The tobacco loves it here in Florida. This one's getting whipped by the wind, but you can see all the little gnats and stuff that just get caught in these resinous leaves. And you got to clean all that off if you really want to process them, but it does help with the insect control. So that's the garden, guys. It's early on. This is the first stage of the successional growth. Things are going to form canopies soon. I'm really excited to see what it's going to look like at the end of the summer. I'll keep posting updates, but for right now, it's hot. I'm sweating. I think it's getting ready to rain, so I'm gonna head inside. You guys take care, and I'll see you next time.